Hello, everybody. My name is Sylvia Dickman, and I'll be talking about learning Flutter by building a small game today. Before I start, I would like to say I would really love to talk to you in person live today, but when this screening is recorded, I will be at DevFest Johannesburg, and I wasn't sure I'd have access to good internet while I'm on the road. So just to be safe, this is a pre-recording, but I hope I'll be listening to the stream on the day of the screening, and maybe we can have a conversation through the stream. And I will share my contact information at the very end. Right, so let's get started. I thought I'll start by telling you a little bit about myself, just in case you wonder who I am. Let me adjust the camera a little bit. Okay, so I'm an app developer. I currently work mostly as a freelancer, and I do a lot of pro bono work, but I've also in the past worked as a technical manager. I didn't start out as an app developer. I started out in the back end. I did a lot of high performance client server software kind of in the enterprise world. Eventually did a bit of web, although frankly I was rubbish at it. And then, web wasn't too much fun, so I moved towards mobile apps, did a bit of Flutter, and yeah, for the last 3 or 4 years now, I work almost exclusively in Flutter. I live in South Africa. I've been living here for the last 10 years or so, but I also divide my time between South Africa and Germany. Tonight, I'm actually calling from South Africa. What can you say about me otherwise? I am very involved in the Google Developer Groups community. So I used to lead the Cape Town chapter, and I'm still supporting them wherever I can. That's the sister chapter to the Antananarivo chapter that organized this event here today. I am a Women Tech Maker ambassador. Women Tech Makers is a program by Google that aims to highlight and lift up the women in technology. We all feel that there are too few of us around, so we would like to get a little more visibility. And then I am a very proud member of the Flutteristas network. Now, if you haven't heard of the Flutteristas, it is a network for female and non-binary Flutter developers. It's worldwide, all online community. It's everybody can join, and it is a very supportive network. I can highly recommend that if you're into Flutter and you identify as a woman or non-binary. And then finally, most importantly for this talk, I am a Google developer expert for Flutter and Dart. Now, if this bio sounds a bit all over the place, it maybe is, but there is one connecting thread in all of this. I love studying tech, I love playing with tech, and so I often set myself little challenges, experiments, where I explore new technology and then make a talk about it or share my findings with the wider community. And that's kind of how we end up here today. So what I want to do today is I want to cover 2 very different themes. The first one is an intro into Flutter. I want to give you a little bit of a highlight view of what Flutter is and hopefully answer the question, is this technology a good choice for your small project or your MVP? The second question I would like to answer is writing is doing a goofy side project, or you'll find that the project I'm introducing here is really quite silly. Can that be the right vehicle to bootstrap your tech career, or will it be rather a distraction because it is so silly? And we'll see how I end up on both questions. So if I think back about what got me interested in Flutter, one thing springs to my mind, and this is a true story. A long time ago, way before I actually did Flutter, I was managing a mobile app team, but I didn't really know enough about the technology myself. So I wanted to get better at it. And I set myself the challenge to write a mobile app. I did that as a side project. I wrote an Android app to manage our wine cellar. Not terribly useful, but a lot of fun. I spent a lot of time writing this app and kind of studying Android and really understanding it. And when I was done, much to my surprise, I had to learn that all my friends have iPhones. That was, I had not really thought this through. And, I had picked Android because I was working for a nonprofit at the time, and our user base was low to middle income South Africans who almost exclusively have Android phones. But in my circle of friends, many had iPhones, so I couldn't really share my app. And this was the point where I had two choices, basically. I could either start again, go back to kind of studying the next platform, write an iOS app, maintain both in parallel for a while, and basically learn iOS like I learned Android. Or I could look for a cross-platform solution. And this is basically where I stumbled across Flutter. It was at that point fairly new, but it already showed some promise as a cross-platform toolkit. So this is the quote from their website, and I think it sums up the philosophy very nicely. It is about building, testing, and deploying beautiful mobile, web, desktop, and embedded apps from a single code base. This is going to be an overview talk, so I won't go into too much detail of Flutter, but I thought I'd at least have to scratch the surface a little bit. And I want to show kind of why Flutter is so popular. So what is it? First question. It's a UI software development kit. Its biggest strength, in my view, is that it allows you to build native apps from a single platform. It was originally created by Google, released, I believe, in 2017, and has since then received constant updates, about roughly once a quarter. Actually, the slide is slightly outdated. Like earlier this week, they launched a new version 3.16, so we are not longer at 3.13. Oh, and by the way, it is created by Google, but it is absolutely open sourced. Google has not kept proprietary rights of it. Because of all of this, because of the long development cycle and kind of the constant improvements, it is for quite a while now considered, Flutter is considered mature and production ready. And in fact, if you look at the list, and this is just kind of a very random list, but there are a lot of big companies who actively use Flutter and have made quite good experiences with it. So these are all international companies. At South African, I have to mention one company. This is Eskom Push. This is the app that we all use on a daily basis to check when our next load shedding hits us. It's a very South African problem. Right. So I said Flutter is production ready. And in fact, it has been used extensively. Now, usage numbers are always a bit hard to come by, but this is one number that Google has published. They have said in May of this year that over 1 million apps have been shipped using Flutter to many hundreds of millions devices. This is a graph I borrowed from the official Flutter Forward keynote speech, so one of Google's big events. I think it demonstrates nicely what the Flutter team themselves put their focus on and kind of what we as developers can expect from the system. So they basically categorize their effort into 5 pillars. So let's go through them one by one. The first one is beauty. This means that Flutter gives developers complete control over every pixel on the screen, and the results can be truly spectacular. To get us started, they provide opinionated UI widgets But if you don't like these widgets or if they don't suit your needs, you can always override them or add your own or extend what's there. You have absolute control over every pixel. A second pillar is speed. This talks about the fact that Flutter apps are compiled to native, not interpreted. And so that means that even though it's a cross-platform framework, the app in the end to the end user should feel as snappy as a native app should feel. The end user should really not feel that they're using a cross-platform app. The third pillar is about productivity. This and the next is most important to me. So this talks about the fact that Flutter comes with a really awesome tool chain that makes the development process quite easy. It's still work, but it really helps a lot. The most important tool by far is hot reloading, and that is truly awesome. And I'll show you later in a demo what this can do. The next pillar is portability, and this deals with the fact that with very little modifications, your source code, your code can run on up to 7 platforms. So these 7 platforms, let's list them. We have Android, iOS, macOS, Linux, Windows, web, and embedded systems. Most apps, to be fair, won't take advantage of all 7 platforms. That seems to be a bit of an artificial use case. However, what is very common is that an app takes advantage of 2 or 3 platforms. So I very often launch apps simultaneously on Android, iOS, and maybe the web. So there already you have the 3 biggest platforms from a single code base. Okay, and the last pillar deals with openness. That's about the fact that the entire source code is open sourced. Now that has 2 advantages. Number 1, it means that as an app developer or as a developer who maybe has an issue with something, who found a bug or has a feature request or so, I'm not dependent on Google alone. Google might or might not get to fixing this bug that I just discovered. That's okay. There's a huge community who's also taking an interest in it and who might actually get much quicker to this than the Flutter team itself. The second advantage of having an open source system is that I can inspect the entire code base at any time, and I'm actually learning a lot about the code. So quite often, if I, for example, don't like the way they are currently drawing a button in material design, I can look at that button code, I can make changes, I can decide, I can override, or I can extend it, or I can just throw it away and write my own. I have complete access over the code. So this is good for learning the system, and it's also good for kind of gracefully extending it without going too deep immediately. Right, so this is a pretty good tour so far, but I just want to mention a few more points, very few. This is a bit of a quip. When you start with Flutter, you hear this a lot. Everything is a widget. What this means is you're building your UI from a stack of widgets. So you have your entire canvas is the first widget. Inside you have an app bar and a body and a footer. Those are widgets. Inside that body you have maybe a few columns or a few rows or so. All of these are widgets. In technical terms, this is called reactive or declarative UI framework. And if you've worked with, for example, React or with Android Compose, it will look quite familiar to you. One thing that surprised me a little bit initially, although it makes a lot of sense when you think about it, is that the Flutter core is actually very, very small. A lot of what I would have considered absolutely essential functionality is not part of the core. It's added through external packages. Now that turns out to be a really powerful mechanism of extending the framework. So any additional functionality can be published in a package. This package can be shared in a public repo. It can be commented on. You can inspect the source code again. And so what this means is that the entire community is again participating in the process. So many of the top packages are provided by the Flutter team themselves, but by far not all of them. So for example, currently the most popular package for routing is not written, has not been provided by the Flutter team, but by somebody externally. And, you know, everybody has the same opportunity of posting their code, their packages. The language for Flutter is Dart, the underlying programming language. Dart is fairly new, and it was new to me, certainly, when I started to work with Flutter. But it turns out it's pretty well designed and quite easy to learn. So if, you know, don't let a new programming language keep you from learning Flutter. So I could talk about this for quite a while longer, but I think it's time to look at something more concrete. So let's think about how you would get started with Flutter. So to get started, the first thing you have to do, and this is mandatory, is you have to install the Flutter SDK on your system. So you have to download it first and install it. The second step is not mandatory, but it is extremely recommended. You should figure out which editor you want to use and download a plugin that supports Flutter. So most people use either Android Studio or VS Code, and you know, which one you prefer is totally up to you. But both of them have Flutter plugins that really help you. And then you're ready to write your first app. I would recommend you start with one of the code labs. The Flutter team has really awesome code labs. They also have a bunch of cookbooks. So generally their documentation is really good. So at this point, hopefully, you know, if you worked through a few code labs, you have the fundamentals. And now it's time to work on a bigger project and hopefully reach lift-off velocity fairly soon. So I don't have time to do a full code lab here, but I want to show you at least kind of the very first steps of the first code lab. And what I did for this is I set up a fresh project, and you know, I could have done this from Android Studio. Android Studio has a new project button, but I actually did it from the command line. I said Flutter create. Then I listed the platforms I wanted to support, iOS, Android. I gave it my domain name and a project name. And that was all. And at this point, I ended up with a project. Now I have a video here, but I actually think I would like to show you the code directly. So this is my Android Studio editor. Yes, you see on the right side the emulator, and in the middle will be my code, and on the left side here you see a list of the classes in that project. First thing you see is a pubspec YAML. This is where, you know, anytime you want to introduce a new package into your code, this is where you would specify that package. So at the moment, there's not a lot in there because it is a very simple project, but you know, this will grow over time. Every time you add a new package, you then have to say pubget to actually pull in the source for that new library that you just introduced. And then from there on, you can use it. What else do we have? We have an Android directory here. This is for the native Android code. Then we have an iOS directory for the native iOS code. And we have a lib directory. And this is where our Dart code lives. And this is basically what we are working on today. So because this project is so simple, everything is in one file. That's probably not recommended for larger projects, but it will do all right. So what I want to do now is I want to start this project here. So I'm starting it on the Pixel 2 emulator. Because it's a cold start, it takes a few seconds to start for the first time. After that, it will be a lot faster. All right, here is the project. What it does, it's super trivial. It builds up a page with an app bar, floating action button, and some body here. This is a stateful widget. Every time I press the floating action button, my counter increases. So that's kind of the basic app. And let's look at the code briefly. Now this is a plain vanilla code. I just removed a few comments, simply not because they were bad, but because they were kind of distracting a little bit from the code. So at the top level here, I have my first widget, my material app, which sets up the theme and the home page, my home page. So let's look at this home page. This is a stateful app. And then eventually I have a build method here with a scaffold top app, inside an app bar, a body, and a floating action button. And inside that body, I have a center widget, inside a column with a bunch of text. And that's it already. So let's start to modify this a little bit. Sorry, this pop-up here is really annoying. I don't know how to get rid of this quickly. Bear with me. So let's change the color of the app bar. Let's say colors. A nice color is, why don't we take yellow? Okay, I have changed it, but I haven't saved it. I'm saving it now. And as you can see, the emulator immediately, so this is the hot reloading feature that I talked about. Every time I make a change, it immediately shows up in the emulator. This is super powerful for development. So I've changed the app bar. Let me change a text. Let me add a text. Text. Hello there. Oh no, come on. Right. So here's my new text. Maybe space this a bit. Let's say space evenly. Sure, that looks pretty good, right? And so this is basically, you can kind of play around with the UI now. You see immediately what you're changing. Yeah, this is on, I'm demonstrating this on Android, but let's see what happens if I switch to an iOS emulator. So I have one running here. There it is. This is a cold start again, and it takes a little bit longer on iOS, but once it's running for the first time, it will be just as fast as on Android. All right, anytime now. Yes, there it's coming. All right, because I had already changed the code, the iOS simulator now displays the modified code already with the extra text, with the change, with the different color app bar. Actually, let's change that again. Let's do that orange, and I'm saving again. There it is, and maybe let's move all the text to the top. Why not? Does my button work? Yes. So I hope you got convinced that the app, the same code, absolutely runs side by side on Android and iOS. It's very simple to switch back and forth, and the hot reloading by itself is, for me, the reason to stick with Flutter. It's so absolutely awesome. All right, let's go back to my slides. Yes. Remember the slide here. I had at that point, I just glossed over a little bit, find a larger problem to work on. And that's, in fact, what I want to talk about now. So if you think back about the early year 2020, that's when COVID hit, and South Africa at least was in lockdown for, I think, 8 weeks or so. It was a long time. And even afterwards, life wasn't quite normal. So I, like everybody else, was at home and bored, and I decided to use my time for something new. And I had looked briefly at Flutter before, but hadn't really done anything very serious about it. And so, yeah, I wanted to master Flutter. So I was looking for a project that I could apply myself to. And yeah, at this point, I probably should have directed my energy to solve one of the big problems of mankind. That's what I should have done, but I didn't. Instead, what I did is I wrote a really, really silly novelty game that has absolutely no commercial or social ambition. My choice. I'll explain in a second what I do, but before I have to do a tiny little detour here. I have worked in IT all my life, but the rest of my family are farmers, and they farm in northern Germany. They farm cereal, sugar beets mostly, but they also grow Christmas trees. These are actually pictures from their farm. In December, my family runs a pop-up shop on our farm where customers come, walk through the plantation, pick out a tree, and then we cut the tree for them. This sounds a bit bizarre, but Germans absolutely love to decorate their home for Christmas with a freshly cut tree. And picking the perfect tree is a big deal for families, especially if they have small kids. And by the way, this does sound like an environmental disaster, but remember, Germany is cold and wet and trees grow quite easily, so it can be actually done really sustainable. So, with this in mind, this is my project, the Tree Finder or Baumfinder in German. This is what got me hooked on Flutter in lockdown. So when I set out on this project, I set myself a bunch of goals. I wanted to, whatever the project was, I wanted to have a Flutter showcase, something that demonstrates Flutter concepts in a setting that allows for mistakes. But while it allows for mistakes, it should, my aim was to use best engineering practices as much as possible and cut corners only where strictly necessary. With one exception, there is one area where I never cut corners, and that was privacy and data protection. I feel that my users are doing me a huge favor by trying out this app, and I cannot mess with their privacy. That would not be right. The project should be launched on Android and iOS. Web at that point was not on the horizon yet, and I still have it on my to-do list to add web to. And yeah, this is kind of meant as entertainment while I was in lockdown, or while we were all in lockdown, so it was meant to be fun. While I had these goals, I also had a few very clear non-goals. The first one was the UI. Now, this is a bit of an issue, actually, because as I said earlier, Flutter is a UI toolkit. However, the fact is, I am not a designer. I have no design skills. I'm a backend engineer. And so, while I would like to center my experiments on a pretty UI, I just can't. So, yeah. The second thing I wanted to make clear is this was meant to, and I was okay with the fact that the project would fall behind a little bit. I'm now going into the third season with this project. Outside of the holiday season, it is absolutely not maintained, and even at the moment, it should really get a little bit of TLC. But it is a side project for me. What is also really important for me is I did not care whether this would be a commercial success. I didn't look at any kind of download rates or ratings in the Play Store or so. All of that didn't matter. What mattered to me was feedback from my users only. And, it should never feel like work. That was, I think, the most important to me. So if you count all of this together, you end up with a demo that it kind of comes along in the mantle of a professional MVP. I treated it as a professional MVP, but it was not. The demo of character always shines through, and yes, the project has some really rough edges, and that's totally fine with me. So, what is the app actually doing? Since I knew that picking out this fresh Christmas tree for Christmas is such a big deal for so many Germans, I decided to place my lockdown project around kind of a tongue-in-cheek game to help with this. Now, I hope you realize now this is really tongue-in-cheek and a bit of a joke. Selecting a tree is not that difficult, and you don't really need an app for it. But this app served as a really good demo scenario for my purpose. So the Baumfinder was written. It was launched in the App Store and the Play Store. And a few of our customers tried it out and gave me some really interesting feedback, which I really appreciated. So what does it do? I have a video again, but I think I would like to show you directly. So this is the app here. This time it's running on a Nexus just because it allows for bigger pictures. If you start playing, you get presented with a series of images side by side. Let me flip the screen, get the images a little bit bigger. So you get randomly 2 images side by side, and you can flick away the one you like less. And so hopefully after a while you have found your dream tree. That looks nice. No, the other one looks nice. All right. Once you've gone through a series of images, you supposedly have made your choice, and it says something like, oh, this is a very nice tree. You find other trees on our farm. You can now share this image with your friends if you want. That's the way it hopefully one day goes viral. Or you can play again. It turns out it's quite addictive, and people usually don't play a single game. Right, okay, there it goes. What else do we have? We have, let me switch this back. So this is the list of recent games you've played, but you can also now upload your own images. Now this is the first time where you actually have to log in, and this is basically because I felt like if I, as the app creator, start to display other people's content, I have to make sure they sign the T's and C's, and I'm not showing any copyrighted material. So this is why I forced the user to sign in at this point, just to make sure in the sign-in process they have accepted the terms. Okay, now I actually signed in as an admin, which means I can see my own list of images that I have uploaded, but I can also get a full list of every single one. And now I can actually, as an admin, I can crop the image differently, like, upload a new image or crop it. I can change the copy. I can mark this. I can unimprove this if I don't want this image to be part of the game, and so on. I have a language toggle. I can switch between German and English. And yeah, I can give myself a screen name and of course sign out again. And I think that is all of the relevant functionality. So let me go back to my slide deck. So at this point now, you two are an expert Christmas tree shopper. So let's look a little bit into the underlying tech. So these here are just some pieces of the puzzle. As you see, all of these components are fairly fundamental. And once you've mastered something like state management, for example, in the context of this goofy app, you can pretty much do any professional project. The list is pretty long, so let's look at just a few so far. The first one I want to talk about is responsive and adaptive layout. Responsiveness means means the fact that the app deals with changes in screen size and orientation. So here, for example, if I flip my pixel, I go from a 1-column layout to a 2-column layout. Or if I go to a bigger screen, a tablet screen, I center my image better. Adaptiveness deals with different input devices, and to be honest, for this game, I really didn't do very well on adaptiveness. So in the next round, I should really fix that. If you look at how this is implemented, as a designer, you still have to handle the scenarios yourself. So you have to decide, if the phone is in landscape mode, do I want to have 2 columns, and what should be in these columns? But what Flutter provides is it provides a mechanism to recognize changes and then pull the correct design and automatically redraw the components that need to be redrawn if something changes in your assumptions. So for example, you flip the phone. So this is all you need to do. Okay, the next topic I want to talk about is internationalization. And internationalization and localization. As somebody who lives on 2 continents, this is always a requirement for any of my apps. Most apps, if they support internationalization, they typically follow the device preferences. But even if you want to put in an explicit toggle like I did here, it is pretty straightforward. Of course, I should point out now, Flutter provides, again, the framework, and it helps with pulling the correct translations. But it is my responsibility to provide these translations in the first place. The app doesn't translate for me. So for this particular app, I started in German and then later translated many phrases into English. But at some points, I was lazy. So if you find a place in the app where a page shows a mix of German and English, that's not Flutter's fault. That is just me being lazy. Here, I've just never provided the English string for this piece of content here. So let's look how it's done. The first thing you have to do is add 2 packages, Flutter localizations and internationalization. Both are provided by the Flutter people, by the Flutter team. And then you have to bind these into the material app widget, so into your top widget. And then from there on, you start providing your own translations, each of them in a separate ALP file. Now, what Flutter will do now for you is it will auto-generate the Dart code from these ALP files every time you run Flutter. And then in your app, all you have to do is, whenever you want to display a text, you use the handle for the text. And Flutter at runtime will determine which translation will be appropriate to show. Right. The next topic I would like to briefly talk about is image capture and image resizing. So this was about the fact that I wanted to upload images and then wanted to make it as easy as possible for the user to kind of frame the image nicely and store it. Image handling is a little bit tricky because every time you deal with hardware, it is typically platform specific. So with Flutter being a cross-platform framework, that requires a little bit of work. So what the Flutter people came up with is this concept of platform channels. A platform channel is designed to allow to interact with platform-specific API. So as a rule of thumb, every time you deal with sensor information, you're probably using a platform channel. Luckily, in this case, the camera access is so common that I didn't have to write my own platform channel. Instead, the Flutter team had already provided a platform library with a platform channel for me. Image resizing is a little less common. But also in this case, I hadn't do it myself. I found a third-party package that worked just as well. And then for storage, I wanted to use Firebase, Fire Storage. And once again, there is a great library of APIs and libraries that allow you to interface with Firestore quite easily. Right. The last topic I want to briefly touch on is routing and deep linking. This is an interesting topic and has become a very interesting topic since web came about. The reason is that web and mobile apps have somewhat different ways of handling stack and backlinks. And for a while, this was causing a bit of a problem for Flutter when web came around. To address this, the Flutter team provided a new router and navigator API, which general consensus was it was pretty good, it solved the problem, but it was incredibly complicated to use and people didn't like it that much. Luckily, since then, help came about. Several third-party developers have provided packages on top of Router and Navigator that provide the same functionality, are just so much easier to use. The one that seems to bubble to the top at the moment is Go Router. I've used it a few times and really like it. It allows you to declare your routes in a declarative style that still works well with deep links regardless of the platform. All right, I think I'm done with my tour of my app components. So let's now go back to the original question that I wanted to answer. The first one was like, is Flutter a suitable tool for small projects? Yes or no? Here, my answer is absolutely. But let's look at the requirements first. What do small projects need? Basically, it's about building a decent project with limited resources. No multiple teams, no platform experts, no endless development cycle. It has to be maintainable, and the quality has to be decent enough. Flutter addresses all of this pretty well through their multi-platform support, which means that you don't need multiple teams, you don't need an iOS expert, you don't need to build your app twice, and also you don't have feature drift. So you don't end up with a situation where the iOS team implemented the specs quite slightly differently than the Android team, and the poor support engineer does not know anymore what to tell customers. So in addition, the great tooling is really helpful. It makes development much easier, and the resulting app is snappy enough for all purposes. So my conclusion is Flutter cross-platform development is a compromise, granted, but I feel that I would happily do that compromise. I think I miss very little with Flutter. So I would say on this question, it is absolutely a yes. The second question I wanted to tackle was, can a small and goofy game like this be a good tool to advance your career? And here the answer is a little bit more nuanced. I would be slightly more careful and say, maybe yes, it depends. And it depends on the situation and your personality, more personality than situation. So what do I mean by this? Let me start by going through a few common wisdoms. They're so common, they're almost platitudes. What do I have? Learning anything takes time, right? When we're learning, we learn best by doing it, whatever that is. It takes more than one iteration to get good at anything. Your first app most likely stinks. In fact, here it is on the slide. Your first project will likely have some flaws. Learning is a journey, and how well you do on that journey is made up by many things. I think the motivation is the biggest factor in it. So what does that mean? You need to find something that drives you. And this is where it's about your personality. Pick a project that meets your needs. Build a story that makes sense to you. That's all that matters. Ultimately, the story is just a vehicle to learn the tech. So you want to study tech, it doesn't matter which story to use to study that tech. In case you wonder how this has worked out for me, actually really well. I launched my really goofy tree finder projects where, in addition to the parts that you saw today, I learned a lot about release management and CI/CD. And then I did a slider puzzle game for a Google-sponsored hackathon. That one focused on web. It meant to win me the cup, but I also learned a lot about state management, animations, user journeys, generally clean architecture, a few more things. Then afterwards came the fish tracker, a time management tool that taught me about material 3, navigation, wearers, integration, and so on. Next project was my trusted wine cellar management app, where it's about image recognition, geo-tracking, and more things. Aside from the fact that all of these projects have crappy logos, I'm not a designer, remember, each of them I picked very consciously because they contained a crucial aspect of some new tech or something that was new to me at the time, that I felt, I was learning something new with each of these projects. However, all of these were side projects and were no commercial successes, and I never really cared for commercial successes. No commercial success, it still means I've learned, and so they actually turned me from a tech manager with very little expertise in app management to by now a recognized Google developer expert. Right, I think I'm at the end. This is it, and here's my contact information. I'm not sure we still have time for Q&A, and I'm not sure if on the day when you see this, I will be able to make contact with you. But if not, feel free, take a quick picture of the slide. Feel free to reach out to me, send me an email, find me on LinkedIn or on Twitter. I would love to hear what you think about this talk, what you think about my app, or get into a discussion about your issues. Yes, thank you very much for listening. This was really fun for me, and I hope you also enjoyed it. Bye-bye.